I want to welcome everybody to Recruiting the Next Generation webinar, and I want to be very thankful of your time. We're going to try to get you as much information as we can in a short amount of time. We expect this to go between 45 minutes and an hour, but if questions keep coming and you guys would like more information, we will keep going as long as it takes. My name is Travis Yates. I am a retired commander with the Major Municipal Police Department, and during that time, I was over for a season the recruiting unit. And I saw the struggles that happened as law enforcement needed to transition to a more aggressive recruiting fashion. And let me explain that briefly. And before I get to that, just some housekeeping things. If as far as the view goes, if you want a better experience, you can go to the upper right-hand corner of this meeting and hit view and hit speaker view. And that may help out given the predominant person speaking the screen for you. And as you formulate any questions you may have, just kind of jot them down, and we'll have a time at the end of this to discuss those questions. But my experience initially with recruiting was commanding a recruiting unit. I had supervisors, I had recruiters, and the tide started to change in law enforcement. And let me explain that briefly. I was hired in 1993, and there were 1,000 people in the room for about 11 openings. And law enforcement, for the most part, had experienced that kind of qualified candidates. And here's what I mean by that. Law enforcement specifically didn't really have to worry about for many years if they would get enough qualified candidates. It was really just a matter of getting the most qualified candidates. I've talked about this a lot. I call it kind of, when you have 150%, 200% of qualified candidates, you don't have to worry about actually recruiting, but you have to worry about the marketing and the branding to try to entice them to your department. So that's what departments predominantly did for many, many years. And then several years ago, that tide started to change. I started speaking about this several years ago, and there were a number of factors that caused that. First off, in 1994, the COPS grant was passed. If you're as old as me, you remember that we hired 100,000 new police officers through the COPS grant. Well, 30 years later, close to 30 years later, many of those individuals are now retiring and leaving law enforcement. So there's a gap there. You combine that with public sentiment, you combine that with politics, you combine that with all the things we know is going on, and the new generation of folks that don't necessarily look for a career. They see a job as it ends to a mean. So a lot of people aren't looking at law enforcement as a career. They'll come into it for a few years and then leave. So there's a lot of things that kind of came together, and all of a sudden law enforcement had to really focus on recruiting. And there's a mindset there where we didn't really, if we were honest, have to recruit. We marketed, and there's a huge difference between marketing and recruiting. Marketing is making your department look as good as possible, so you get people that are already qualified or are already applying, and you get to select them. Recruiting is convincing someone that maybe has no interest of going into law enforcement and making them a candidate. And it's completely different. And so what I think we've seen, because a lot of departments are doing a lot of things differently, which is a good thing, but if the mindset is still from a marketing angle, which it has been since the inception of the profession for the most part, you're going to still struggle. And that's actually what we're seeing. IACP just sent out a report that 87% of law enforcement is struggling with recruits. Their staffing is low. And so my desire is to get this right. And when I was over recruiting unit, there was this transition going on. I saw a bunch of marketing. I saw a bunch of branding. In fact, I specifically remember I was just the commander over the unit, so I wasn't in the day-to-day stuff, but our recruiters were going to the University of Arkansas for a recruiting trip. And that's my alma mater. And they asked if I wanted to go. And I said, sure, it'd be a fun day. And I can specifically remember we took 2 recruiters plus me. So I think it was about $1,500 to go to the recruiting fair, three personnel away from work. So this was a multi-$1,000 trip. And we got to the recruiting fair with a bunch of other recruiting booths. And many of you have experienced this, and nobody was there. I think we talked to 2 people all day. Come to find out, the internet's a powerful thing, and the new generation's a powerful thing. Recruiting fairs weren't exactly working, but I was struggling to get the recruiters to get out of the mindset of that, because that had worked for so many years. So there's a bunch of techniques, a bunch of tactics, a bunch of things we have to think about if we're going to actually recruit. And I'm excited today. I'm with lawofficer.com, and law officer asked me to do this along with Safeguard Recruiting. And I wanted to do it because I have deep concerns. A lot of folks continue to struggle. And if we don't get this right and our staffing continues to dip, I don't have to tell you what's going to occur and continue to occur in some communities. And so my desire is, from an education standpoint, of trying to give some tips and some things that we know has worked. And Safeguard Recruiting, when I really wanted to focus in on what the solution and problems were, I wanted to find some folks that had wild success in doing it, because there's a lot of folks out there doing it, rightfully so. It's called capitalism, right? And a lot of our agencies are kind of struggling with, how do I do this? Can I do this on my own? Do I need other people? And we're going to get to all of that, because none of this is rocket science, folks. Recruiting has been around for decades. In the private industry, it's a very competitive market, and they have to constantly recruit. But until now, law enforcement has not necessarily had to recruit. We mainly marketed. So I'm excited to have Jake Peters and Doug Larsen on. They're going to get into some fine details of what they've seen works, what they've seen don't work. And I know some of you, and contacting us, we'll give you all that at the end of this, but I'm at lawofficer.com. You can just you can hit the email up, and they'll forward that over to me. And they are, of course, at safeguardrecruiting.com. So I kind of outline some of the problems. I don't want to go into that too deep, but the main thing I wanted to get across to you before we kick this off, and I started getting into some details with Doug and Jake, is that we have to recognize the difference between what we've done traditionally and what we have to transition to, because it all matters. If we continue to recruit in ways that we did when we didn't really have a issue with recruits, it's just not going to work. We have to change our mindset and change our tactics. And so a lot of agencies are trying to do that. They're pouring a lot of money into that. And a lot of them still aren't seeing success. And so we'll get into that and talk about maybe what can help you. So I want to first bring on Doug Larsen. Doug, thanks for being on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Travis.
And you've heard my initial discussion. I'm going to assume you agree with a lot of it. I know I've written some articles for your company because I love what you're doing. But you're interesting because you spent many years in law enforcement. You retired from law enforcement and you got in the recruiting industry, not in law enforcement, but the trucking industry. And so I know you're over here now trying to help out law enforcement. That's your passion, but kind of talk to me about some of the struggles you've seen as you got into that industry.
Yeah, Travis. So after retirement, we started in trucking, on the trucking side. We got a sister company called Miramax Solutions, done quite well in recruiting in the truck driving industry. And we've learned a lot from it. And there's a lot to learn from that industry because it's a lot more difficult to recruit drivers. You don't have things to tie a driver to that company. They don't have the pensions. They don't have those benefits that maybe will keep a driver in. So drivers are very transient, and there's a lot of empty trucks. There's a lot of trucks that just can't be filled because there's not enough CDL drivers to go around. And we started tackling this problem for companies because we saw a real need in there. Is a lot of these trucking companies didn't have the resources or the expertise to keep up on the latest trends in recruiting. And we've gotten to be very successful on that side, and to the point where we actually fill trucks and put ourselves out of business for a little bit because we are so successful. Well, my law enforcement background, I never stopped that. I've always been traveling around the country training and talking to different departments. And when they found out what I'm doing for the trucking side, a lot of departments would ask me, will you take a look at what we're doing recruiting wise? We're struggling to get people in the door. We can't get enough candidates to fill our needs. We can't get quality candidates that can pass our backgrounds. And so I started looking into why with these different departments, what is going on and what we're doing on the trucking side. Would it translate over and would it work? And I'm glad you hit on it. A lot of departments, they're driving traffic to their website, but they're not actually going out and finding people that will apply. And there's a lot of steps in there that need to be covered to make this be a successful campaign. So as we went along, and I think over the years, you and I even had discussions over this, we decided to launch Safeguard and jump into the law enforcement realm and start helping out. And from there, everybody knows the story. Well, the last few years, we've had a lot of people leave law enforcement, not as many people apply, but this issue goes back before that. We started seeing trends where less people are applying for law enforcement. I too was around like you were when 1,000 people would show up for a couple openings. And now we need to ask departments, how current is your recruiting process? Have you updated it? Have you changed? Are you tackling the new forms of communication? Are you reaching the right people? Are you communicating with the generations properly? It's easy to drive traffic to your website. It's a little more difficult to find that person that wants to apply, will follow through and apply to your department. And that's where we specialize in. We're very good at getting people to not only see your opening, be interested in your opening, and follow through and fill out that application.
Well, one thing I noticed, Doug, because like I said, probably 7-8 years ago, I starting to see this trend and started trying to warn people. And what a lot of departments did and what they continue to do is, it's not from a lack of effort. They are putting a lot of effort and money into it, but they still don't see success. And one of the first things they did was they updated the website and they upgraded that and even maybe get some recruiting videos on there. That's good stuff. That's just basic stuff. But a website doesn't typically bring recruits. It brings eyes to a website that maybe brands your department and it gives information about your department. And I think what you're alluding to is a lead magnet. You have to not only get the website traffic, you have to get them to apply. And so what are some of the tips that some agencies can think about if they have the website? And like I said, that's kind of basic. I don't think anybody's ever come to the department and said, hey, I came here because I love the website, right? There has to be messaging. There has to be certain things that happen. And so a lot of people focus on the website stuff, but that's still not getting actual recruits, because the success of a recruiting campaign is recruits, not traffic. And I think you alluded to that. So what are some things somebody can do right now to try to get more names if they say, hey, I don't know what's going on? We have a great website. We have some radio ads. We have some billboards. We're going to recruiting fairs. We're not getting names. What's some kind of quick strategies they can do to help improve?
Yeah. The problem with the old school way of doing it, we slap up a billboard or a bus ad, is we're just have to hope that the right person sees that, remembers the information, and follows through. But that's not how most people communicate now. We carry phones with us. We have computers, and what we are advocating is going out and have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week track down the people that fit that profile that would want to apply or be in this line of work, and go out and find them. Take your opening and take it to the person. Don't wait for the person to find you.
Yeah, and I think that's a big difference. I mean, I can only assume that's been a huge difference. And I think I'll speak from 30-year veteran. We think we're more important than we probably are. We think, man, we think this is cool. Everyone else thinks this is cool, but that's not necessarily the case. And so you're trying to identify traits in individuals based on, I would assume, their social media footprint, and go, you reach out to them and grab them versus hoping they see something and hit on it. And once that occurs, what has to happen after that? Because it has to be more than you grabbing them, Doug. What else are you guys looking at to try to help?
Well, you can't communicate enough. And we can't stress that enough. You got to have communication, because nowadays, if you aren't communicating with a person, they interpret that as more of a lack of interest. And that's something that in law enforcement, we've kind of had to transition to, because it used to be we could have a long hiring process. We could string people along and feed them information when we wanted to. And that can't be now. We need to communicate often, have those channels there that they can communicate with us if they have questions. We need to give them the information they need to understand the culture of our department, what's going to be happening in the process. I mean, I'm just saying communication is probably key once you get somebody engaged.
Yeah, I know I have 2 sons in college, and I know when they were going through that admission process, they would get information from a university And man, I still get emails to this day. I mean, I can remember hitting submit and immediately getting an email, getting a phone call within a couple of hours, and then that continues, right? So, because they know that if they don't communicate quickly, they're going to lose them to somebody else. And so, what you're saying is there has to be processes built in from the department to automate that and make that happen. Because you can't expect an individual to be able to do that on a timely basis, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, processes built in. And folks, if you're listening, this isn't a sales pitch. Anyone can do this. I mean, there are companies all over the world that have automated processes. There's a technical expertise involved in it, but there are processes that you can implement right now in your recruiting process to automate that. Obviously, messaging is important, and we'll get to the importance of expertise in a minute. But that's what you're talking about, Doug, is an automated process with real people as quickly as possible speaking to a candidate.
Correct. Let's speak to the candidate and let's understand the candidate too, right? We got a number of different generations here that we're dealing with, and we need to know how to communicate with each of those generations, what's important to them. But I agree, if you aren't, some departments out there I'm super impressed with. They're doing such an amazing job automating the process, communicating with people, loading them up with information. I'm really impressed. And then others, maybe they don't have the manpower to be able to do this, and they're a little bit lagging behind, or maybe they haven't transitioned and from away from maybe just phone calls and start sending more communications and different methods, different lines of communication. And that's what I think needs to happen.
Well, and you talk about the timeline about, because I could remember applying many years ago, and hey, you'll hear something within 6 months, and then once you hear something within 6 months, they'll say, well, the academy's in 6 more months. And they just expect you to hang on to that department. And sometimes, but they had so many candidates, they didn't have to worry about losing candidates to other departments. Well, now you can't lose them. If you get initial interest, you need to grab them and keep a hold of them. So how important is it to shorten that timeline from the recruiting campaign to getting the recruit, to getting the background, to getting the application, to get the testing process with a job offer? How important is that?
Oh, it's very important. And we're seeing a lot of departments have started to streamline this. And we got to remember, in law enforcement, we're not just competing against each other. I hear that a lot. Well, I'm competing against the departments around me. No, you're competing with other industries. You're competing with other lines of business that can hire quickly. And for a person out there, yeah, are you going to wait 6 months for the maybe, or are you going to take the I have the job offer in hand? And most people are going to take the job offer that's right there and committable.
Yeah, you have to remember, if you've got a qualified candidate in law enforcement, they obviously have good background, they've got good work ethic, they've been a decent person, or they wouldn't be qualified for the department. Well, that means they're qualified for every other job on the planet. I mean, that means every other employer wants them as well if they have the standards to come into your department. So that makes it even more difficult when you get to say, well, yeah, you get to work weekends for the first 5 or 6 years, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll get to do this, while you have these other jobs that are either doing hybrids or remote work, and they're paying just as much. And so the department has to really make them believe and act like, listen, we do care about you. And that comes back to communication, does it not?
It does come back to communication. If we're going to have a process where you're going to have to go through a background check, a physical test, maybe a written test, we need to spell that all out, make the candidate comfortable too, because of what they're going to do every step of the way, and help them prepare for it. And so let's bring them in, let them see what the culture of our department is, how they fit within the culture of the department, and let them know how much we want them on board with us and to have a career with our department. It's very important to communicate. And that's one thing that I think we need to improve on.
Yeah, I mean, that's all such solid points. And I'll be honest, if I'm sitting there listening to this, I'm thinking, man, that's a lot of stuff to try to do. I mean, I know when I was involved in recruiting, I didn't know anything about it, right? I mean, I tried to learn as quick as possible. I knew enough to know something wasn't right because we weren't getting the recruits we wanted. But I was, the way law enforcement works is people go from assignment to assignment. Not everybody that's put in recruiting, they didn't come into law enforcement to be a recruiter. That's just an assignment, a stop along the way. And, and it's obviously it's a great job. You get to be the face of the department and try to make sure your department's legacy continues. But most people aren't there for long enough to build the expertise up that you're talking about. That's what concerns me as I'm listening to this. I'm like, man, this is I thought I knew a lot, but the processes you're talking about to make this successful, sometimes we need more than just a cop to do it, because sometimes in law enforcement, we think cops can do it all, right? We need some IT guy, there's this guy over here do it. Or we need to hang a TV, this guy over here can do it. So that's just our mentality. But when it comes to recruiting, this is such an important issue. How important is it for an agency to get some help somewhere to help them along the way?
Well, you're exactly right, because we're talking specialties here, and it's hard to find that within a department and somebody that wants to do that within a department. Because you hit it right on the head there. Is most of us didn't get into law enforcement saying, hey, I want to be the recruiter for the department, but it's a place that, hey, maybe we can promote to, or we rotate into and we rotate out of, and we're not there long enough to get the specialties to be able to understand the technical side of it and keep up with the latest trends. That's where you need an expert, and that's where you need to bring an expert in. And sometimes in law enforcement, it's a little hard to bring in an expert, right? It's outside of our comfort zone sometimes, that says, hey, I need to bring somebody in to fill in these little pieces for me. But there's nothing wrong with that to help you out.
Yeah, and I want everybody to be careful when they do that. First off, I know I've talked to you guys a lot. You guys answer any questions I have. It doesn't cost me a thing. As like I said, until recently, I was at an agency and I had really deep concern with this stuff. And I help out a lot of friends around the country, and I send them over your way. And you're not. What I love about you guys is you're not trying to do some sales pitch all the time. You actually go month to month, which is a horrible business model, because you're not locking anybody into a contract. But what I want to caution people about, whether you try to get help wherever you are, make sure, because a lot of marketing companies, right, advertising companies have come into this space. Listen, I'm not blaming them. There's a lot of money to be had. There's millions and millions of dollars being spent in government right now to recruit law enforcement, rightfully so. So I'm glad the resources are there. But you need to spend that money wisely. So give them some tips, Doug, if they're using somebody, or if they want to use somebody, some things to look for to make sure they're spending their money wisely. I know I've already mentioned it's not about clicks, it's about actual names you're getting to apply, but kind of give them some quick tips on that.
Yeah, I think they need to, and Jake will hit on some of this technical side of it, but you need to really monitor that difference between what kind of hits am I getting on my website, or am I actually getting people to apply to my department, and how is that money being spent, and what kind of reporting am I getting back, so I can make good decisions off where I'm spending my money, where these candidates are coming from, and how can I get them to take the next step in my application process. And we've kind of streamlined this down. We figure out some steps. If we leave them out, it maybe creates a little void in success rates. So it's definitely an approach that you've got to have. You don't want people getting lost in your website trying to figure out how to apply for your job, and that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, the recruiters are very important. The background investigators are very important. It's important to have a face from the department that represents the department. Your assistants can be on the back end from a technical expertise. But when you get candidates in, you need people to work those candidates, background checks, and communicate. And they have to be very good, because have you seen instances, Doug, where you've sent people a lot of candidates, but because the backgrounds are working so slowly, they're losing those candidates?
Yeah, we've been able to, we've sent a large number of candidates to departments, and they don't have enough recruiters to be able to handle that. And that has been an issue, and their processes have been too slow. So they're letting people sit for too long without any kind of communication with them. And then they just don't have enough resources to cover it. Maybe they're set up for getting 3 to 5 names a month, and we don't see that as successful for them. We need to get more names into them, and they've got to be able to handle those when they come in, or it's kind of a wasted process.
Thank you, Doug. And Jake, we talked somewhat about technology, and you're all technology. You're the expert here, and you're the kind of the guy behind the scenes. You're not a law enforcement background, but you've got the education and background in technology that has been incredible. I know that, and you've helped a lot of people out. how important is it to use the power of technology in recruiting? I know, listen, I'm not discounting job fairs or websites or billboards, that traditional stuff. We need to do that because we still have people that want to be police officers. You know, I call it, if you used to have 200% qualified candidates, well, you have 70 or 80 now, but you got to go find the other 20%. So that stuff's still important, but how important is it to put a level of technology on top of those traditional methods?
Yeah, thank you, Travis. So the most important thing that technology is going to bring to your recruiting campaign is it's going to allow you to take an aggressive and streamlined approach. So like you and Doug were talking about, when you incorporate technology and the right type of marketing campaigns, you can target ideal candidates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And more importantly, you can hit them on the channels that they're using. So if you compare this to the story that you talked about at the beginning, Travis, where you spent thousands of dollars to travel to the University of Arkansas, go to a recruiting fair, you're hoping somebody shows up. That's more of a passive approach. Where if you incorporate technology, you can, one, save yourself a lot of travel. Well, I'm sure you enjoyed a trip to Arkansas. Probably was exhausting, spent a lot of money. So you can save yourself a lot of travel, and you can hit people that you know are going to be qualified where they already are on the channels and the devices that they're using. So that's going to be the more aggressive, take your job to the people, and then it's streamlined. All right, let's show the people that are qualified. Let's show it to people who maybe they're searching for a job right now, or maybe they've done some Google searches on the career in the past. They never followed through. They're more of a passive seeker. Let's bring the job to those people. Let's get them and get them to apply so we can reach into an audience that maybe would never attend a fair, or maybe they would see a billboard. They think, oh, that's pretty cool, but there's something holding them back from applying because it was too cumbersome. There's a big hurdle to get in. By using technology, you can get those people, make it easier for them to apply, and then you can streamline the process to just actually speak to those people. And the way technology does this is you actually automate a lot of the tedious tasks. So there's kind of almost two sides of the technology and recruiting you could think of. You can think of the outreach, which is this aggressive approach, 24/7, active and passive seekers on the channels they use, on the devices they use. And then there's the back end of the process out of getting your department to speak with these candidates and making that process as simple as possible for your recruiters. So one thing I like to bring up when we work with different departments is if you call a candidate within the first 5 minutes of them sending their information over to you, it's 21 times more effective than calling even in the first 30 minutes. So now think about if somebody submits you their information, you call them a week later, right? They've moved on. This whole webinar is about recruiting the next generation. How do we get, younger people, the next wave of officers in the career? Well, you have to understand. So 73% of seekers 18 to 34 found their last job through social media. And what this means is, and Doug, you spoke on this a little bit, people are blasted with job ads constantly. This is not a novel concept. Doug and I came from trucking. There are careers doing this. And so for law enforcement, you may have a great outreach, but if you're not using technology to automate your processes on the back end, you're taking a long time to follow up with leads. They're going to be hit with other industries, other opportunities, and you're going to lose those candidates. And so some of the tasks that you can automate, text and email follow-up, right? Simple, like you said in the college story, right? You sent your information or your son sent their information, they got a text immediately. Another process that college is automating on the back end, which departments need to be doing, is a recruiter was notified immediately your son sent their information. And that's why you get that phone call. Okay, so you can automate this tedious task. You don't have to go searching for it. You can filter candidates, right? If somebody's not qualified because they don't have a GED or high school education or a college education, or maybe you can ask them, hey, have you ever, are you willing to submit a background check? If they answer any type of question like that in an unfavorable way, you can just filter them out so you're not wasting your time on the phone with conversations that are in the end kind of useless for you all. Beyond that, candidate nurturing, right? So the hiring process is lengthy. There are steps people have to go through. So why not use technology to send follow-up, reminders like, hey, you have a physical test coming up. Here's the requirements you have to pass. Maybe here's a conditioning program that our departments put together for recruits. And so by using technology, reach the people, automate the process. And like Doug was mentioning, when we work with departments who maybe aren't fully incorporating technology well, it's tough to handle all these leads, but by using technology, you can actually bring in more leads and adequately recruit more people in an easier manner. So this, again, streamlined and aggressive approach that incorporating technology in your recruiting allows you to do. And it's the experience that younger people want, really, at the end of the day, or the next generation.
If you're listening right now, in about 10 minutes, we're going to open up the question and answer session. Feel free to go to the chat feature and type in your question, but feel free to hit the little hand button there at the bottom. If you like us, we'll bring you on and we can talk to you one-on-one. So just kind of be thinking about that, but we're getting close to that. And Jake, I want to get down to the brass knuckles here, because from law enforcement, this all stuff sounds great. I want to know what it's going to cost me. So let's take my University of Arkansas standard. Did I mention they're in the SEC? Did I mention their football program struggling? But I will move on. I spent a lot of money to go look at that football stadium that day. I would say on an estimate, when you look at salaries, when you look at registration, when you look at food, when you look at gas, we're about $4,000 in for that day where we saw two people and never had a follow-up with them. And so for $4,000, what can you actually do with that kind of money if you wanted to target the same area? You start targeted the same university, targeted the people in there. Is that even enough money to help out? I mean, because budgets are tight. I mean, although I'm thankful that we have budgets to do this, but is that even enough to even help out? I mean, I know you've been doing this, but you tell me, you tell us it's here. What are we talking about here? Would that be success to us?
Yeah. So with that $4,000, we get you a lot more than two people. For example, we work with departments, $1,000 hiring small town, middle America, and they spoke to about 120 people in a month, and that's entry level correctional officers.
That's an entry level $1,000. You were able to send them over 100 people. So you have case studies on this on the website. I saw this. I was bruising that before this webinar, and so I'll tell everybody now. We'll have you guys send those case studies in an email to everybody when they get off here. But you have one on that case study. I noticed what's called an ROI, return on investment. You're actually telling these departments you work with how much money it took to get one qualified candidate. I was kind of blown away. I think one was like $22 or something. I was like, what? I mean, that's not even possible. But tell us how that success happens, because you can't just sling it everywhere. You're really taking a fine-tooth comb, so to speak, and finding the right people with that money. And because there's drawbacks to social media, like you can't just sling an ad out on social media and expect people to hit on it. So what are some of the drawbacks departments need to be watching for if they're doing some online stuff on social media?
Right. Well, the biggest thing you're hitting on is wasted time and wasted money. And so if you're wasting money, you're probably using the wrong message for the wrong audience. And so that's not going to convert. That's not going to get you that cost per lead. Wasted time. This stuff takes a lot of effort. You have to create the ads, you have to create the messaging. And so it can be really frustrating to, feel like you have a solid social media campaign. You have this technical back end set up, and then nobody's coming through. And so an example of this actually is we've seen departments who aren't familiar with employment advertising policies. And Facebook, for example, has very strict employment ad policies. They don't want any employment discrimination on their platform. And if you aren't aware of that, we've seen departments lose their ability to run Facebook ads entirely from their page. Facebook will just ban them. An example of a policy is you can't target based off of gender. So let's say your department wants to take an aggressive approach, bringing more women out, right? You want to diversify your workforce. That's a noble cause and something that the industry needs to be doing. Facebook won't let you target specifically women on Facebook. And so you have to have strategies in place, and your imaging and your messaging has to organically attract more women to your campaign. And you can
mention law enforcement, usually 21 to 40 or 50, whatever it is. But I mean, I'm assuming agencies don't want to spend money to attract 80-year-old guys. No offense to the 80-year-old guys that are in positions of power in our country, but you don't want to attract. That's probably not a viable candidate. So do they have rules on that as well?
Yeah. So exactly. You can't say, On Facebook, if it's an employment ad, you have to charge everybody that's 18 and older, or
Okay.
target anyone 18 and older. However, if you know this policy, you know how the algorithms work. If you use images of younger people are going to click on the ads more, and then Facebook targets more people like that. So they know somebody who's 23 is more likely to click on the ad and engage with it. They're going to target more 23-year-olds for you. And they know that the 80-year-olds, right? 80-year-olds aren't interested in a picture of a 24-year-old, law enforcement agency. They're going to feel like this position is not for me. And you almost kind of trick the system into targeting the people you want for you, as opposed to
I post something, or it says boost the post, and you can just
right.
boost money and boost it. What you're saying is it's way deeper than that. You have to write images. You have to have the right messaging, because if you just boost the post, you're boosting that for everybody, and everybody is not our target audience. You're looking at qualified candidates. So there's a lot of sort of detail that needs to go into that. Is that kind of what you're going with there?
Yeah. So I mean, if you look in the private industries, they build marketing personas. They write out, you almost need to be doing that for your ideal candidate. What is the person who you want to hire going to be interested in about your position? And another thing you need to do that technology will help you out with is you need to track your data real time. You don't really get this as much as boosting the posts, but track your data so you know what works and what doesn't work. And over the course of a couple months, you can really optimize your messaging, optimize which channels you're hitting, and really bring in that next generation of officers that you want to hire, instead of spending that time and money on people who aren't qualified or people who aren't engaging with the ads from your department.
Man, this is a lot of information, folks. Doug and Jake, I'm so appreciative of you coming on and what you're trying to do for the profession. When I hear about some of the things you're doing there, it doesn't seem like you're in it for the money, for sure, because a month-to-month contract, no one's doing that anymore. But I appreciate the expertise you're having and what you've done. You've seen what works, you've seen what doesn't work. And if you're here, if you got any questions, we're going to take those here in a second. But I want to also invite all of you, since you joined us live today, this is for both those of you that joined us live. We're doing a recruiting summit in Orlando, Florida, November 2nd. And we're going to offer that to you for free. That actually costs money, but you're more than welcome to come for free if you're in the area, or if you want to jump on a plane and come. I believe it's a 4-hour seminar, right, with a bunch of questions answered afterwards. You guys are going to have some sheriffs and chiefs there, and a bunch more information, really. And you're going to go into a lot more detail in that, guys. So I know that they wanted to offer that for free if you took the time to join us today. And Doug, any parting thoughts before we get to the question and answer? Jake, you have any parting thoughts before we get to questions and answers?
No parting thoughts, but Doug, you might have said something. You were muted there. No, the biggest thing is, again, taking a streamlined and aggressive approach.
Okay, let's open this up for some questions and answers. And once again, you can hit the little thumb button, or you can hit us on chat, and we'll even bring you up if you like. I did have some questions that came into me over the last week or two when this went up. They said they may not be able to think if they wanted me to address this to the audience. So I'll start going through some of those. But if you have any questions, Jake, I'll let you run that. If anybody has any questions, they can hit the thumbs up, or they can hit the chat, and you can feed those to me. But I had somebody ask me about part-time recruiters. We had a lot of agencies, they don't have the resources, they're not large enough to have full-time recruiters. And they asked me the effectiveness of that. I would say absolutely part-time recruiters are effective, but let me give everybody else something else to think about. The best recruiters at your agency are your employees, all of them, right? I mean, so we get in a real bad habit in law enforcement of going, well, the traffic guys work collisions. The robbery guys work robbery. We're all specialized. And I think when it comes to recruiting, we don't want to be careful and go, well, oh, you want to come on the department? Call the recruiting person. Oh yeah, it's a holiday, so they'll be back in the office tomorrow. No, I think the more we can educate our personnel to be recruiters, because most of your personnel have friends, they went to high school, they went to college, they have a circle of influence wherever they are, whether it's church or sports or whatever they're doing. Those are your best recruiters. And I know you guys have an affiliate program to where you actually incentivize an agency where you can give a code, just like Amazon does, right? It's an affiliate program where you can give all the information to your officers to be their own recruiters. And if somebody they talk to, ends up getting hired, a lot of agencies have financed a bonus to those officers. So that's a great way to spend your resources, because man, if I can get a fellow officer to convince someone else to come on there, there's that immediate relationship, and they were talking good about the department and they're on the department. That's so much better than just some recruiter that's their job. So that's kind of a big deal. So I would encourage the agencies out there to make all of your officers recruiters. I know in my agency, it was like, well, if you want to be a recruiter, you can apply to be a recruiter. You can apply to be a part-time recruiter. Hey, we ought to do a better job of making sure everybody in your agency are the recruiters. Brian asked, are there any courses you can recommend taking that give any accreditation to recruiting? I'm not in the recruiting industry. I'll ask these two guys that, as far as education, to try to get up to speed on, because there are full-time recruiters, there's full-time headhunters, and there's an education process to do that job. Doug and Jake, do you guys have any knowledge about any type of accelerated training, high-end training that these recruiters can get?
Yeah, so I know. Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, you're up, Jake. Go.
Well, I was just saying, so Safeguard, we did put together a webinar series. It's not accredited, obviously, but we can send that over to you. And then I can't think of any courses specifically for law enforcement recruiting, but recruitment practices in general. Like Coursera will have courses that are put together by different colleges, universities that can help.
I would say, I think you guys have about a 30 or 45 minute series of videos. That's great. That's a great to get started in law enforcement. But I can tell you, I've seen a lot of success on LinkedIn, maybe not necessarily in the recruiting world, but there's a lot of courses on there because LinkedIn is a professional organization. So they have a training section on LinkedIn. I think you can get a free trial on that. And I would only assume there's a lot of business recruiting in there. That's similar to what we're talking about. Yeah, we may be talking about law enforcement, but businesses are also, they've had to be high-end recruiters for a very long time. In the business world, I mean, I'll hear stories about, because this guy will just leave his desk because he got a big offer with this other competitor. So they had to be really, really aggressive. So there's going to be some business courses out there on that. Resources specifically for law enforcement, man, I haven't seen it. That's why I know I helped you guys with the training series several months back, because we couldn't find anything and we were trying to educate people. So we can send all that over to you. But I think it's going to still be important, if you want to get up on speed, look what the business world's doing. Because in the business world, unlike law enforcement, if they don't recruit, they go out of business. We don't recruit. Yeah, we could hire the county, or we could make it work. We could cut services. We don't have the option to go out of business. But the business world, it's all about profit and loss, and they have to be aggressive in recruiting. So I say what they're doing is very, very important. Let me see what else I have.
And if I could add something, Travis, even if you aren't a client of Safeguards, if you got some questions, you want us to take a look at what you're doing or offer some advice, reach out to us. We've done that for a number of departments. We'll definitely take a look and help out where we can, or give you some advice and steer you in the proper direction.
Yeah. One other kind of quirky tip we like to give people is sales courses are actually really useful. Again, this is a competitive market. You have to sell the candidates on coming to work for you. So any sales course, those are a dime a dozen. If you just Google sales courses, learn how to really get speak to these candidates and get them in the pipeline as quick as possible and hire.
Yeah, we live in a day and time. Where this information is out there. Obviously, be careful what you're digesting, but we certainly live in that day and time. Brian's asked how you can contact us. I'm at lawofficer.com. That doesn't come directly to me, but they will send that over to me if you just hit the contact button and email and send that over to you guys at safeguardrecruiting.com, Jake at safeguardrecruiting.com, Doug at safeguardrecruiting.com. Pretty simple, but hit the website up and any contact button is going to come to you guys, right?
Correct.
Yep.
And Brian, I'm trying to get Brian on. He's got a lot of great questions, but we'll see. Make sure he wants to come on. But I keep getting talked to you about websites, because a lot of departments have put up fancy websites. We love those, right? I love them, but they're not seeing a lot of results. So, and they keep asking me what's wrong. And almost every time I'm not seeing a good enough lead generation, lead magnet. Like everybody in the business world does this, and you've done this yourself. You've gone to some website and a box pops up and it says give us your information. And, so, but there's some science behind that. You can't just expect people to plug in their email just because. So there's some sort of lead generation, lead magnet that entices them. So Jake, do you have anything to add to that of how important it is not to just get visits to the website, but get their contact information? Because you may not get a full application, but you need to get their contact information to get them in your automated processes.
Right. Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice is determine what key performance indicators you want to measure. So if it's leads, like you have to be measuring leads. One kind of funny thing, like I said, safeguard is it's about hiring COPs, not about CPCs, or CPCs cost per click. If you work with that marketing agency, they're going to say CPCs.
Give me that again. We're not technology savvy. Give me the acronyms again.
All right, so it's about hiring COPs, not about CPCs.
Oh, cops. Oh, I'm with you now.
Yeah. Okay, so and CPC, that cost per click. So if you're just measuring this traffic, let's say you have a conversion rate of 1% and you get 1,000 clicks, that's 10 names, right? But you might have spent $500 for 1,000 clicks. What is that? $2 per, per click, right? That's, you'd be like, oh my God, our CPC is so low, $2 per click. That's awesome. But you got 10 names.
Yeah, the clicks
that you want to have that, that key performance indicator measuring. Names, not clicks.
I would tell you this, Jake, from being involved in this, talking to people all over the country, in my mind, that's the biggest problem we have right now is we think clicks matter. They don't. Talk to any business. They don't care about clicks. They want conversions. So we've got to get in that mindset. That's really, really a big deal. I don't know if you see any questions, Jake. I'm gonna answer one more, and we're gonna let everybody get on their way. So thank you. If you got any other questions, get them in here in the next few minutes. But here, this one is kind of a big deal. It says our agency is fully staffed at the moment. Great job. But we're expecting to lose about 10% of our staffing in 2024 and 2025. Well, I would tell you first off, looking ahead, that's great. I can't tell you how many departments they knew people were leaving. They waited for them to leave to go, oh my goodness, we need to recruit now. So yeah, that's looking ahead is a great thing. He goes, when should we begin our recruiting campaign? Okay. So he knows he's going to be losing about 10% of his personnel, probably through I didn't ask him, but probably through his pension system where they kind of know this is going to happen. I'm not going to give the department, but it's a good department if they're fully staffed and you're looking ahead. And he wants to know, when do we begin this? We know in the next 24 months this is going to happen. I would tell you, we should get recruiting campaign out of our vocabulary. In the business world, they recruit nonstop, whether they have openings or not, because they know when they have an opening, they want to be able to go to that pool of applicants and pull them up. Jake or Doug, I'm gonna throw this to you. What would you say to a department that sort of still has that traditional mindset of, we have an academy in a year, so 6 months for the academy, we'll start a short recruiting campaign to grab people? That may have worked when you had a lot of people, but it certainly is not going to work now. So what would you say to that?
I think you should always have people in your pipeline, always have people in the process. And we need to know how long their process is going to be to hire. That kind of gives us a start date right there. But when we know we have these types of issues, let's make sure we've got a mentoring program, an outreach program, and we're reaching out to those people early on, getting interest, getting them to understand how they fit in our department and our culture, but not knowing how long it takes them from start to finish to close and what their closure rate is on when they get recruits in. It's a little hard to give them a hard date, but if 2024 is coming up real soon, I'd be starting this thing in process right away.
Right. Now, Doug, you guys have, I noticed on your website, you have a mentoring program to where you can actually, you reach into high schools and you start cultivating people. They may not be of the age yet, but you start cultivating and communicating with people very early on. That's similar to the military, right? Military starts contacting people, I believe, their junior year in high school. That seems pretty interesting. I know, have you had any departments take you up on that?
Yeah, we're early in the stages of that and working out the mentoring program, but it is a very powerful piece of what we can offer, because you start getting people interested in not only the profession, but in your organization at an early age, and give them goals to work for, the process to work through, and get them prepared. It's powerful. And other industries use it, and law enforcement needs to do it more.
Yeah, I love some of the programs law enforcement has, whether it's the PAL program or whether it's the SRO program, seeing those officers early on. But I think it goes back to Jake, what Jake was talking about with that communication piece. The mentoring program, it keeps them in communication, whether they're seeing a cop in the classroom or not. It kind of keeps that going on a slow basis, similar to what when you get emails from a business you've frequented. You know, I know there's a couple of businesses, I get an email every couple of weeks. Maybe you don't send them out that often, but it keeps it in the back of my mind. I mean, I know for a fact my buying patterns are based on an email list I'm on where I go, oh, I forgot all about that place. Let me take a look at it. So that's kind of what that program's about, is it not?
Correct. Yep. Keep them informed, keep them involved, and keep your department right in front of them so that it's on their mind.
Jake Peters, Doug Larsen, I appreciate you guys' time. We appreciate Safeguard Recruiting for sponsoring this. We appreciate lawofficer.com for sponsoring this. Everybody that has registered will get a follow-up email and a recording of this. You'll get a contact. So if you have any questions after this webinar, just reach out. I mean, I don't think anybody here has a problem answering any questions you have. Or I know my goal, I know you guys' goal, because I know you guys pretty well, is you just want to help the profession. We can look down the future, and if we don't get this right, really, really bad things occur. So thanks to everybody for spending their time with us. I'll remind you, since you're here, free ticket to Orlando. It's going to be a great time. We're looking forward to that on November 2nd. And that information will be coming out live tomorrow. We've got some great speakers talking about generation stuff and a whole bunch of good stuff I think that you will enjoy with that. So keep that in mind. So thanks for being here. We'll see you soon.